There they are. Let's make sure I don't drop the camera like I did. I'm gonna go back and find that little footage of when I pops and the cat-like reflexes saved the camera from crashing to the floor. Exception. This is the shirt I forgot. I was supposed to bring it to Mushfest and I forgot this shirt. This is like, gosh darn it, I was there with like poor Tad trying to dress Pops. Just wait for a few people to join. This is going to be a lot of fun. Thank you, Eric. This is going to be a lot of fun. We're just going to read. Okay? We're just going to read. You guys know who John Cleese is? Turn it on the volcano. You're hilarious. You guys know who John Cleese is? I forgot. I meant to do a little blurb to pull him up on the Google and see, do a little bio on him. So this is one of the Monty Python guys, right? Okay. There's a myth that creativity is something that you have to be born with. He says that's a myth. I agree. I'll tell you why. I've become more creative as I've gotten more creative. This isn't the case. Anyone can be creative. Oh, Pops, how do I come up? Anyone can be creative. You might think that creativity is some mysterious. Are you guys ready? Give me 5 people. Give me 5 people. Say, go, Pops. We're ready. For those of you that stick around till 11, 5 minutes to 11, we'll have one big giveaway. Kind of a hook. For those that are stick around, and you could be smart, just hang up now and come back at 5 minutes to 11. I think creativity is so darn important, you guys. That's why I am pushing this issue. First of all, shrooms cause us brains to grow more and we get more creative. But only if you practice. Only if you practice. Only if you come up with your new ideas. Let's do it. You might think that creativity is some mysterious rare gift, one that only a few possess. John Cleese would beg to differ. As he shows in the short, practical, and often amusing guide, it's a skill that anyone can acquire. Drawing on his lifelong experience as a writer, Cleese shares his insights into the nature of the creative process and offers advice on how to get there and get your own inventive juices flowing. What do you need to do to get yourself in the right frame of mind? Microdose? When do you know that you've come up with an idea that might be worth pursuing? What should you do if you think you've hit a brick wall? We can all be more creative. John Cleese shows us how. May I ask, is the volume on the music okay? Talk to me about the volume. Is it okay? Should we turn it down a little? Just making sure, because I don't know what you guys get at your end. Jesus Christ, I didn't change my clothes. All I did was took my my lab jacket off and threw a hat on. Big Guns is here. Good job. Thank you for the feedback there on the volume. Appreciate it. Here we go. This is introduction. By creativity, I simply mean new ways of thinking about things. Most people think of creativity as being entirely about the arts, music, painting, theater, movies, dancing, sculpture, etc. They didn't mention gardening. But this simply isn't so. Creativity can be seen in every area of life, in science or in business or in sport. Wherever you can find a way of doing things that is better than what has been done before, you are being creative. Another myth is that creativity is something you have to be born with. That isn't the case. Anyone can be creative. When I was at school in the late 40s and 50s, No teacher ever mentioned the word creativity. Just think how extraordinary that is. Mind you, this was partly because I did science at school. My A levels were math, physics, and chemistry. And of course, there isn't a lot of room for creativity in these subjects. You have to learn an awful lot of science before you can even begin to think about taking a creative approach. Then I went to Cambridge and studied law. Not much creativity there. You just had to decide whether one particular set of facts fell into this category or that category. But regardless of the subjects I chose to study, it's clear that nobody in charge of the English education system seemed to have realized that there was any need to teach creativity. And you can teach creativity. Or perhaps I should say more accurately, you can teach people how to create circumstances in which they will become more creative. And that's what this book is about. Chapter 1. The first time I discovered I was a bit creative became as a surprise. I was at Cambridge, and I had to get to know a very nice group of people who had a small club near my digs, as they were a part of a society called the Footlights. They put on little shows on the clubroom stage, performing sketches and monologues and musical skits. I didn't join the Footlights because I thought I might want to go into business. Not at all. I was going to be a lawyer. I joined the club because its members were the nicest bunch of people I met at Cambridge. Sounds like Tea Crew. They were good company, of course, since they were all in one way or another funny. And they were also an interesting mixture of social classes and academic interests. For some reason, maybe because of the sense of humor, they weren't stuck up or show-offs or in any way impressed with themselves. Go to Mushfest, you saw people just like that. To become a member of the Footlights, you first had to write something. I therefore came up with a couple of sketches to perform, and I was accepted. Each month I discovered they organized what was known as a smoker, short for the old-fashioned phrase smoking concert. This was a show put on in the Footlights club room in which all members took part. Because everyone had to get up and do something, we all had an interest in creating a nice, friendly atmosphere. So it was the perfect environment if you were performing for the first time. And it was during the course of writing sketches, the first imaginative thing that I was ever conscious of doing, that I realized I could be creative. That is to say, if I wrote something down on a piece of paper and performed it later on, I could make people laugh. And the point is, what I was writing was original. I don't mean that I wasn't influenced by lots of other people and comedy programs, but what was going down on paper was mine. And then I started becoming aware of something else that was very interesting and very odd too. If I wrote a sketch by myself in the evening, I'd often get stuck and would sit there at my little desk, cudgeling my brain. Eventually, I'd give up and go to bed. And in the morning, I'd wake up, make myself a cup of coffee, I'd drift over to the desk and sit at it, and almost immediately, the solution to the problem I'd been wrestling with the previous evening became quite obvious to me. So obvious that I couldn't understand why I hadn't spotted it the night before, but I hadn't. This is how I began to discover that if I put the work in before going to bed, I often had a little creative idea overnight. He says that in bold letters. It's a big concept. I do the same thing. I find myself thinking and then I fall asleep and I think stuff happens in there. I often had a little creative idea overnight which fixed whatever the problem was that I was trying to deal with. It was like a gift, a reward for all my wrestling with the puzzle. I began to think to myself, it can only be that while I'm asleep, my mind goes on working at the problem so that I can get an answer in the morning. This realization was very foreign to me. I'd always assumed that thinking was about furrowing my brow and trying terribly hard. While I was still wondering about this, something else occurred. I sometimes collaborated with my friend Graham Chapman, and we had written a parody of a Church of England sermon. At that time, Graham and I were both obsessed with all the humor we could derive from the Bible. Life of Brian. So much so that when people came into my room and saw an authorized version on my desk, they would say, "Oh, you've been writing again." They see the Bible on his desk. Graham and I thought it was rather a good sketch. It was therefore terribly embarrassing when I found I'd lost it. I knew Graham was going to be cross, so when I'd given up looking for it, I sat down and I rewrote the whole thing from memory. It actually turned out to be easier than I expected. Then I found the original sketch and out of curiosity checked to see how well I'd recalled it when rewriting. Weirdly, I discovered that the remembered version was actually an improvement on the one that Graham and I had originally written. This puzzled the hell out of me. Again, I was forced to the conclusion that my mind must have continued to think about the sketch after Graham and I had finished it, and that my mind had been improving what we'd written without making any conscious attempt to do so. So when I remembered it, it came out better. Chewing this over, I realized, like the tip of the tongue phenomenon, when you can't remember a name and you chase after it in your mind and you find you cannot recall it, and then a few moments later when you're thinking about something else, boop, that name pops into your mind. Clearly your brain was still working on it even after you'd given up. That's pretty neat. Give me some likes. Algorithm, give me some likes. So I began to realize that, bold letters, my unconscious was working on stuff all the time without my being consciously aware of it. It's working away. Stuff's going on in there. You're not even aware of it. This is about creativity, but it's one of the reasons I talk about being impeccable too. The more good stuff we put in there, you're not even aware of it, and it's growing gooder, gooder, gooder. You put some crap in there, you're not even aware of it. It's getting crappier and crappier and crappier. Garbage in, garbage out. Impeccable in. No matter what's going on, unconsciously, you're getting, oh man, I'm getting more and more impeccable. It's the only thing I want to put in there. The trouble with the word unconscious is that it has all sorts of connotations concerning Sigmund Freud and psychoanalysis. The word unconscious. We immediately jump to this idea. For him, the unconscious was like a dustbin into which you put all those nasty thoughts and feelings that you are frightened or ashamed of. You try to keep the lid on it until you are no longer strong enough, and then you have a nervous breakdown. Thanks, Freud. But I'm using the word unconscious in quite a different sense. I'm describing what's going on quite normally in all of us all the time, without which we'd be overwhelmed by the sheer volume of the things we have to take care of in our everyday life. This neatly dovetails with this book, which we'll be picking up tomorrow. One example is your physiology. When you've eaten, your body will digest the meal for you. There is simply no way you can help it by trying to become conscious of the digestive process. The best you can do is facilitate things by, for example, not eating 2 desserts before sprinting 400 meters. Make it easier on yourself to process. But you can't consciously cause yourself a different digestive process. Consider blinking your eye or scratching an itch or licking your lips. These are all things that generally happen without your even being conscious of what you had done. If someone throws a brick at you, you duck. You don't first carefully evaluate the alternatives. Even rather more demanding activities that require learned skills involve this same principle. You can shave or dress or tie your shoelaces without having to concentrate on what you're doing. Your body is used to all the necessary actions and will actually carry them out better if you're not thinking about them. Next time you want to tie your shoelaces, try concentrating. You'll find it's actually harder. The same applies to speaking. You use the right words the whole time without having the slightest idea how they happen to pop in your head. If you are asked the name of a 5-letter Chinese animal that eats bamboo, panda pops up right away. But you have no awareness of how this occurred. Did your mind look in the China file, or in the animal file, or in the bamboo eater file, or in the 5-letter file? We have no idea. It's literally an unconscious process. That's kind of cool. Now think of the really skillful things that you can do without conscious effort. You can drive from your home to your place of work perfectly safely without having to concentrate on every single muscular process involved, even though your mind is absorbed by something else. Absorbed. Or think of something even more complex, like playing the piano. When someone's doing that, they are not consciously thinking which key they have to hit with which finger. Their unconscious knows how to do that. But only because they practice and practice and practice. I'm going to say this, man. Practice kindness. Practice goodness. Practice awareness of who are you acting like right now. The more you practice, the better player you'll be. It's the same in sports. Golfers will practice their golf swing. Tennis players, their backhand. Cricketers, their ability to catch until these skills become effortless in the sense that no mental input is required. The top basketball players will shout, "Stop thinking," to a colleague who is not having a good day, because conscious thinking is causing them to shoot less well. In acting, the moment you have to think what you're going to say next, there's a little less energy for the acting itself, because it's being siphoned off by the conscious mind for the purpose of remembering. Thank you, Terry. This intelligent unconscious of ours, then, is astoundingly powerful. Let me say that again. It's in bold letters. This intelligent unconsciousness of ours is incredibly powerful. It's so powerful we don't even know it. It's in there working 24/7. I only work about 8 hours a day. It allows us to perform most of our tasks in life without even requiring us to concentrate on them. Without it, we couldn't function at all. There'd be too much to think about. Oh my God, I'd be overwhelmed. Should I sneeze? Or just sneeze? I have to think, well, I'm gonna blink now. But that doesn't mean that our intelligent unconscious behaves in an entirely predictable way. A perfect example, an experimental psychologist in the US asked a group of people to view various Chinese characters that were displayed on a screen like this. 5 Chinese characters. Boop, they're up on a screen. We want you to view them. The volunteers were then asked to return a few days later to look at another batch. Some of the characters they viewed this time around, they had seen the week before. Others were quite new to them. They were asked to say which ones they recognized from the previous session. The results were as you would guess, completely hopeless. People had absolutely no clue when it came to recalling these unfamiliar shapes. Then, the psychologist repeated the experiment with a different group. But this time, after the second session, the volunteers were not asked to identify which characters they had seen the week before. They were simply asked to say which ones they liked best. Second week, which of these do you like best? This may seem a rather odd question, but the group seemed to understand what was required. And they were able to say, yes, I prefer this character to that character. And now for the mind-boggling fact. The ones they liked were the ones that they had seen before. You couldn't remember them when you were asked to recall it. But when you were asked to recall ones you liked, you remembered them. Think about this for a moment. Their unconscious recognized the Chinese characters from the previous week, but instead of prompting the volunteers to say, yes, I saw that last week, it was simply generated by a feeling of liking. And that's the problem with the unconscious. It is unconscious. You can't order it about or hit it with a stick. You have to coax it out in all sorts of strange and crafty ways and be clever about it, interpreting what it does tell you. Put simply, you can't ask your unconscious a question and expect a direct answer, neat, tidy little verbal message. This is because your unconscious communicates its knowledge to you solely through the language of the unconscious. And the language of the unconscious is not verbal. Unconscious doesn't speak verbal. That's not the language it speaks. We want answers. Give me the straight answer. Unconscious isn't going to give you a verbal answer. It's the language of the dreams. It shows you images. It gives you feelings. It nudges you around without you immediately knowing where it's getting at. I'll come back to this idea later because it's so important. Give me 5 people say, this is cool, this is interesting, this is going well. Look how far through the book we are already. Look at you guys. We're just getting ready to go into the next chapter. Hare brain and tortoise mind. Huh? This is pretty cool. There's Will. Thank you guys. I think this is neat. I'm glad that I read this, but there's no way you guys can't get this quick. Chapter 2. The schools I attended concentrated entirely on teaching us to think logically, analytically, and verbally or numerically. But what they didn't tell me was that while this way of thinking is absolutely right for solving certain kind of problems, it's not good at all for other kinds. That basic truth became much clearer to me 20 years ago when I was lucky enough to read a wonderful book by Guy Claxton called Hare-Brained Tortoise Mind. In it, Claxton talks about 2 different ways of thinking. The first, he says, involves figuring matters out, weighing up the pros and cons, constructing arguments and solving problems. He goes on to give various examples. A mechanic working out why an engine will not fire. A family arguing over the brochures about which place to go on the next summer vacation. A scientist trying to interpret an intriguing experimental result. A student wrestling with an examination question. All of these are employing a way of knowing that relies on reason and logic, on deliberate conscious thinking. He calls this kind of quick, purposeful thinking harebrained, H-A-R-E, rabbit. Then he argues there's another kind of thinking, which he calls tortoise mind. This, he says, proceeds more slowly. It is often less purposeful, less clear-cut, more playful, leisurely, and almost dreamy. In this mode, we are ruminating or mulling things over, being contemplative and meditative. We may be pondering a problem rather than earnestly trying to solve it. This absolutely crucial point he goes on to make. This leisurely tortoise mind, for all its apparent aimlessness, is just as intelligent as the much faster harebrain. I'm going to give you an answer right now, is not any faster, any more intelligent than Mr. I'm working my way along. I'm pondering, I'm meditative, I'm contemplative. This leisurely tortoise mind, for all its apparent aimlessness, is just as intelligent as the harebrain. Now that's kind of hard for us to accept. We've been taught all our lives, oh, that other brain's the good one. That's the one that's working. We don't think about what we do with our unconscious. Recent scientific evidence, he says, shows convincingly that the more patient, less deliberate modes of mind are particularly suited to making sense of situations that are intricate and shadowy and ill-defined, when we are not sure what needs to be taken into account, or even which questions to pose, or when an issue is too subtle to be captured by the familiar categories of conscious thought. This type of intelligence is associated with what we call creativity, or, wait for it, wisdom. This is wisdom at work. Reading this wonderful stuff, I realized that my schools had such an obsession with logical, creative, and analytical thinking. They never appreciated that this kind of mental process is unless you want to be creative. It was presented as the only way of thinking. Harebrained. It wasn't until I read Guy Claxton's book that I came to understand the tortoise mind. So how can we better understand how to think in this slower, more creative way? My friend Brian Bates, who used to run the psychology department at the University of Sussex, once told me that during the 60s and 70s, some really good research was done on how people can become more creative. But after that, the research generally hit a wall. Because so much of creativity is about the unconscious. There's a limit of what you can say about it. He did, however, tell me about an experiment of practical, fundamental importance that was carried out during the 60s at Berkeley near San Francisco. A remarkable psychologist called Donald McKinnon, who had been a spy master during the Second World War, had become fascinated by creativity, not among artists, but among people like engineers and journalists. He had a particular interest in architects because he could see that they needed to be both creative and highly practical. After all, it's no good designing a beautiful building if it's going to fall down. Donald McKinnon used a number of architects whom they considered to be the most creative ones in the profession. Then he went to these creative architects, and asked them to describe to him what they did from the moment they got up in the morning to the moment they went to bed at night. And then he went to a number of uncreative architects, though he didn't tell them that was why he was talking to them. And he asked them exact same questions. The conclusion that he came to was that there were really only two differences between the creative and the uncreative architects. The first was the creative architects knew how to play. Hold it. The creative architects knew how to play. The second was the creative architects always deferred making decisions for as long as they were allowed. Nope, like that. As long as they're allowed. I can put off that difficult part of the decision making as long as continue to tortoise mind it. Now, when I read this right here, the first thing I thought of is Pop's creative. I like to play. I have make sure that I have time in my brain to play. Do I make snap decisions? Some, yeah, but not important ones. How long did it take me to launch my website and get it right? Creative mind. As a philosopher said, let's unpack these two findings. When McKinnon talks about play, he means the ability to get enjoyably absorbed in a puzzle and not just try to solve it so that you can get on to the next problem. Test trace. Test trace. I need to get, what's my new experiment going to be? Oh, I've done that one before. What's my new experiment? He describes this kind of activity as childlike. Picture small children playing. They are so absorbed in what they are doing, they are not distracted. They're just exploring, not knowing where they're going and not caring either. Right, Trip Vic? Children at play are totally spontaneous. They are not trying to avoid making mistakes. I'll say that again. They are not trying to avoid making mistakes. Here's the neat thing about that. You keep making good decisions, you grow your confidence in your ability to make good decisions. And you would start making more and make better. Practice. They don't observe rules. Oh, that's the best part about being a kid. I don't have to listen to the rules. It would be stupid to say to a child, no, you're not doing that right. At the same time, because their play has no purpose, they feel utterly free from anxiety. Perhaps because adults are keeping an eye on the real world for them. Most adults, by contrast, find it hard to be playful. No doubt because they have to take care of all the responsibilities that come with adult life. Creative adults, however, have not forgotten how to play. Now let's look at the second characteristics of the creative architect. Most people are often surprised to learn that this involves deferring decisions for as long as possible. Doesn't that mean, by definition, that an architect that he's being indecisive? Isn't that a bit impractical and unrealistic? No. It simply means that they are able to tolerate that vague sense of discomfort that we all feel when some important decision is left open, because they know that the answer will eventually present itself. That anxiety, that lack of confidence, that impatience. Let me elaborate. I once wrote a script for a training film about decision making and talked to various experts on the subject. They explained to me that if you have a decision to make, the first question you must ask is, when does this decision have to be made? You live in the real world, so there's always a cutoff point. But once it's been agreed when that real world decision has to happen, why make it before the deadline arrives? Why? Well, it would be foolish, because if you can wait longer, two incredibly important things may happen. You may get new information. You may get new ideas. So why would you make a decision when you don't need to? Trained. Because you're uncomfortable, that's why. You see, leaving the question unresolved, just leaving it open, makes some people anxious. They worry. And if they can't tolerate that mild discomfort, they go ahead and make the decision. They probably fool themselves that they're being decisive. But creative people are much better at tolerating the vague sense of worry that we all get when we leave something unresolved. I won't call it just unresolved, but as we're experimenting. Same thing. So if, like the creative architects, you can tolerate that anxiety, you will be able to give yourself the time to come up with a better decision. New environments. Now, the harder part of being creative. How do we learn to play like a child? Start with this thought. Isn't that funny what Kim just said? Procrastination for the win. We're taught not to procrastinate. In the procrastination time, if it's not procrastination, like you're putting it off because you don't want to make a decision, that's way different than I haven't made a decision because I'm waiting for more information and new thoughts. That's not procrastination. I haven't turned the website on yet because I'm waiting to make sure every duck is completely in a row and that when I do launch, I do it impeccably. I don't need to rush and hurry. How do we learn to play like a child? Start with this thought. The greatest killer of creativity is interruption. Bold letters. The greatest killer of creativity is interruption. It pulls your mind away from what you want to be thinking about. Research has shown that after an interruption, it can take 8 minutes for you to return to your previous state of consciousness and up to 20 to get back into a state of deep focus. Let's just think about this interruptions. Maybe an interruption from outside, like someone coming over and talking to you, or an email popping up in your inbox. Or it may come from inside as you suddenly remember something you've forgotten to do, or worry that time is running out, or that you don't think you're clever enough to solve whatever problem it is that you're trying to deal with. As I was writing this, I heard someone coming down the stairs and it caused me to lose focus. Then I started to think how often that happens. And the same thing happened again. First an external interruption, then an internal. But perhaps the biggest interruption coming from your inside is caused by your worrying about making a mistake. This can paralyze you. You say to yourself, I mustn't think that because it might be wrong. Let me reassure you, when you're being creative, there is no such thing as a mistake. When you are being creative, there is no such thing as a mistake. There's a program. It's called NLP, Neural Linguistics Programming. We use words, human words, and they automatically mean something. And we often have a general idea together, we agree what it means. That word failure takes me to a place in my brain that reminds me of things that I've done that are failures. I don't use the word failure ever again. I reprogram my own speech. This is true. You'll rarely hear me say certain things, and not negative. I rephrase words. Failure does not happen. Mistakes do not happen. I call failure feedback. It's a new word. Whenever my brain wants to say failure, I go, nope, I'm getting feedback. I'm getting new data I may not attempt this again, but if I did attempt again, I have all this new data, so next time I do it, I'll probably have a chance of being more successful. And I mean that. It's just so incredibly important. You can rephrase certain negative terms in our brain to a positive term. It's called neuro-linguistics programming. Linguistic programming. This is programming right here. He's telling you there's no such thing as a mistake if you're being creative. Get rid of the word. Get rid of the concept out of your consciousness. The reason's really simple. You can't possibly know if you're going down a wrong avenue until you've gone down it. So if you have an idea, you must follow your line of thought to the very end to see whether it's likely to be useful or not. You must explore without necessarily knowing where you're going. That's one of my favorite things about mycology. The creative part. You guys saw some of these creepy crisps that come out of here. You want to call them mistakes or do you want to call them feedback? You must explore. As Einstein once pointed out, if you know what you're doing when you're investigating something, then it's not research. In order to remove such interruptions, whether external or internal, so that you can enter your tortoise mind, you have to create a safe place where you can play. This involves first creating boundaries of space and then boundaries of time. You create boundaries of space to stop others interrupting you. You shut the door. You put up the do not disturb sign. Or you go and hide somewhere. I call it a laboratory. I don't know if you guys noticed, but after 8 o'clock at night, my phone's off. Didn't used to be. I'd answer it till 2 o'clock in the morning. Anybody, anytime, anywhere. No. I have to. I learned that this year. 8 o'clock. Not because I have stuff that I'm taking care of. You create boundaries of time. I didn't even know I was doing this stuff, you guys. I swear. I'm playing and I'm creating boundaries of time over here. And I don't make mistakes. I get feedback. You can create boundaries of time by arranging for a specific period to preserve your boundaries of space. For example, decide to create a specific play period that starts in a few minutes' time and finishes, say, 90 minutes later. You treat those 90 minutes with huge respect and don't allow any interruptions. Now, this is if you really want to do it, or we could just talk about it and not do it. Some of us are really good at that. And knowing that this chunk of time is sacred, you can then start to play. That's when I was doing my hobbies, and that's my sacred time. And I know I'm going to get it 7 o'clock tomorrow night. I'm going to go to my sacred time space. And I'm going to be really creative. Have you guys seen the models that I build? I haven't done one in quite a while, but sacred time, sacred space. Of course, it takes a while before you can do this. The chances are the first time you sit down to do it, you're going to say, oh, I forgot to call Tom. And then you'll remember that you haven't yet bought your cat a birthday present. Then you'll recall how embarrassed you were last night that when you couldn't remember your sister's name. Then you'll wonder why your leg is itching so much and why Germany is always winning on penalties and whether you shouldn't actually stop making yourself a cup of coffee. Don't worry. It's the same for everyone when they first start. It's just like meditation. The first time you actually sit still, you become aware of something you don't notice when you're dashing around. And that is that your head is full of silly little thoughts and worries. As Hindus say, the mind is like a chattering, drunken monkey. On, and all completely trivial and uninvited. What can you do about that? Well, people who are stronger minded than me seem to be able to just bat these little thoughts away. Lucky people. I can't do that. Instead, I write them down straight away on a yellow sticky note on my desk. Then I can forget all about them. Once you start chasing away and distracting thoughts, You'll discover, just like meditation, that the longer you sit there, the more your mind calms down, slows down, and settles. Once that starts to happen, you can begin to focus on the problem you've chosen to think about. You just keep it vaguely in there in your mind while you let your thoughts wander around. And in order to avoid allowing them to wander too far, you could take a tip from my great friend, the Oscar-winning screenwriter Bill Goldman. He wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, All the President's Men, The Princess Bride, Misery, A Bridge Too Far, The Great Waldo Pepper, The Hot Rock, Marathon Man, Need I Say More? Well, that's a pretty good resume, Bill Goldman. He once told me that when he was working on a particular scene, he'd write down the key idea behind it on a piece of paper and then stick the note right in front of his nose on the computer. If he realized his mind had wandered too far, he would glance at the note, and that would bring him back to what he was trying to achieve. So you just sit there, and eventually as the mind quiets and odd ideas and notions relevant to your puzzle start popping in your brain. And boy, are they safe, but odd. And the reason they seem odd is that they're not our usual logic, critical, analytical mind. They don't arrive in the form of words or neatly typed sentences because they're coming from your unconscious. Remember, it doesn't speak verbally. Remember? That's the one that you have to listen to, interpret. Because they come from your unconscious. They speak the language of the unconscious. Remember, I touched on this before. Think about how you think when you're not conscious, when you're asleep. Consider your dreams. When you recall your dreams, you remember situations, you remember images, you remember feelings. Oh, that's what I remember. Oh, I woke up all creepy, scared, sweaty. They almost killed me. I was flying and I fell. But nothing's very clear-cut or precise. Now, if you find all this a bit touchy-feely, read what Einstein had to say on the subject of ideas. The words or the language as they are written or spoken, he wrote, do not seem to play any role in my mechanism of thought. Einstein is not thinking with words. The physical entities which seem to serve as elements in thoughts are certain signs and more or less clear images which can be voluntarily reproduced and combined. Eric, have a good day. Kim, have a good day. Thank you guys for being here. We only have about 5 more minutes and we'll do our giveaway. This combinatory play seems to be the essential feature in productive thought. Einstein's still talking. Before there is any connection with logical construction in words or other kinds of signs which can be communicated to others. That was Einstein. The fact is that when you're playing with images and feelings, you never know where a vital prompting may come from. Take August von Stradonitz, the German organic chemist who discovered the structure of benzene. Once late at night, he was sitting staring at the fire. It was an old-fashioned wood fire, so there were flames looking around in all directions. As he gazed, they started to look like snakes to his imagination. The more he gazed into the fire in the sleepy, relaxed way, the more they began to look like snakes that were biting their own tails. As he sat there half asleep, it suddenly occurred to them that the snake biting its own tail was a ring. And that, too, was the structure of a benzene molecule. And if your logical, analytical harebrain senses that you're wandering too far and that hard, logical thinking should be in there somewhere, then think of one of the greatest scientists of all time. Edison, the man who invented the light bulb. He found that he got his best ideas in that funny no man's land between being awake and being asleep. So he used to sit in a comfy armchair with a few ball bearings in his hands and a metal bowl beneath. When he dropped off to sleep, his hand relaxed, the ball bearings fell onto the plate, and the noise woke him up. He'd then pick up the ball bearings again and sit back and get into the same drowsy, dreamy frame of mind he'd just been in. Wow. I gotta try that. So when we are in touch with our unconscious, it sends hints and gentle nudges. And that's why we have to be quiet. That's why we have to practice a kind of creative meditation. Because if we don't, if we instead we're running around, looking at our watches, checking our smartphones, there's not a hope in the hell that we're going to notice the subtle messages we're being sent. A word of warning. When we're trying to be creative, there's a real lack of clarity during most of the process. But when we're trying to be creative, there's a lack of clarity. Don't look for clarity. It's part of the process. Our rational analytical mind, of course, wants clarity. In fact, it worships it. But at the start of creativity, things cannot be clear. They are bound to be confusing. If it's a new thought, how can you possibly understand it straight away? You've never been there before. It's unfamiliar. So much of our tortoise mind takes place in this atmosphere of uncertainty and gentle confusion. I love that spot, to be honest with you. Matt just said it. Man, as soon as I start thinking linear, I'm not winning. Men think win-loss. Humans think top, bottom, black, white, yin, yang, one straight line. Nature has no straight lines. Nature has no wins and losses. I'll give you an example. So, oh yeah, there's wins. When a grizzly bear kills an antelope, the grizzly bear won. No, it didn't. I would argue, no, it didn't. I would almost argue the antelope won. If there's such a thing as win or not. You know why? Because the antelope served its nature purpose. The grizzly was doing what came naturally. The antelope was doing what came naturally. There was no win or loss there. We humans put our own perspective. Oh, there's a win and there's a loss there. No, there's not. There's just a natural cycle there, and we happen to be observing it. And then we put our own value on it. I find myself learning that. Stop putting values on things. Be nature. We literally create our own value and then judge things based off of that. Sling, you're right. Nature didn't pick a team. It didn't say the Grizzlies winning. Matter of fact, I'm kind of digging the antelope. The antelope served a sacred purpose. The grizzly bear is going to go on and have babies. Who won? Don't talk wins and losses. That was one of the biggest mistakes of my life, is to be a scorekeeper. I'm winning. You're losing. I'm not winning. I'm losing. And that's just the win-loss part of linear thinking. Let these new notions of yours slowly become clearer and clearer. So, we literally got halfway through the book. Literally halfway through the book. Dude, was that good stuff so far? We'll pick this back up tomorrow on page 60. We got 60 pages of this. Spiritually right. You keep score, you're losing. Automatic. It's pretty neat. I know, April, I am competitive. That's why I don't like to win or lose, but I learned my competitiveness is part of the goodness of me. Let me compete at being more kind. Let me compete at being more impeccable. Let me compete in the parts of me that are good. Okay? So we'll pick this guy up tomorrow. Let's do a giveaway. I have to grab one thing. Playtime! You guys did such a good job of hanging in here with me. You did such a good job of hanging out and letting us read and play together, be creative together, learn together. Thank you for spending your time, extra time here with me. Here's what we're going to give away. a lot. I want this one to be fun. I want you guys to say, and it's not a bribe. This is giveaway. This is stuff that I've been experimenting with. This is my creative process. I created these. These were an idea. I can keep getting better at it. Let's do molds now. Let's do bars. Let's do different ways. Okay? So this is going out. This too. Let's give you guys this too. Let's throw this out there too. And you know what? Let's throw another couple of chocolates in there too. I'll package this better, but I just took them out of the refrigerator. Okay? So that's what we're going to throw out there. That's worth it, creative people. Okay? I think the best way to do this, we're just going to do a top 10. We're going to do a standard old top 10. Okay? Woo! This is an interesting question. Interesting. So if you think about countries, let's think about countries in the world, okay? And we're going to define what a frontier is. The frontier is the boundary all the way around the whole country. The whole boundary all the way around it. Whatever that boundary all the way around adds up to in miles, that's the frontier of a country. Okay? What country, top 10, I pick one. Which country, top 10, longest frontiers in the world? China's number one, Will. China's number one, and I didn't pick it. But you got the right idea. Russia's number two, and I didn't pick it. Keep going. Where are we at? Russia, USA, China, Brazil. You guys got the right idea. Brazil, Canada, Russia, China, Australia, Brazil, Mexico, Russia, Australia, India, China, Argentina, Mexico, Alaska, Russia, Canada. I love that you guys, oh, Chile, what a smart answer. Chile, Asia, Siberia, very close. Vietnam, India, Argentina, Kazakhstan, Western Australia, Iran, USA, UK, Canada, Brazil, Australia, Mongolia, exception, she's a smart one. Mongolia, exception, smarty. I wonder if she was being creative to come up with that, or it's just a fact she already knew. Let me read the top 10 to you. Top 10. China, number 1. Russia, number 2. They're pretty darn close in size. Brazil, number 3. India, number 4. USA, number 5. Zaire, number 6. Argentina, number 7. Canada, number 8. Mongolia and exception, number 9. I would argue exception's number 1, but she picked number 9. And number 10, Sudan. Congratulations, exception. I know, please just get me your address again. I don't think I kept it. And this whole beautiful pack of stuff is going off to you, okay? You know what? If you want, when you write to me, I can replace 2 of these with plain ones for Christopher. If that's what you would like, let me know, okay? If you want, I can replace this one with 2 plainos for the baby, for the kids. You let me know if that's what you want or not. So, Pop's Piece, we had a phenomenal little reading here today. I think if 5 people, give me 10 people that say, Pops, it was a success. We liked it, and we'll be back tomorrow to finish the book with you. Okay, give me that, and then we'll scroll out of here. That was pretty cool. That time flew by. That time went blink. Next thing you know, we're done. That was really fun. Successful Book of the Month Club. Are you guys going to go play today? Set some time aside to test and experiment and play and be creative. Do it. Do it. Practice makes perfect. How long have I been practicing with him? You guys have seen him. I've been practicing with this guy for 1.5 years. Get out of here. Have a great day, you guys. Vegas, love you, girl. Kat, love you. Slingy and Matthew and Shroom, love her. And Stephen Green, there he is. And Brian Grigga, love you, bro. Love you. Kat and Biggins, Biggs. And Trippy Vicky and Jesus Christ. I'm going to go ahead and take a bong break. Green Table and Spiritual and Sid Hunt, love you. And Slingy and Penny Peck and Lad Brand and Kelly Kell, I love Kelly, man. Kat and Miguel, and Stephen Green and Willie Will and Fungi for Real and Spiritual and Trip and Vic. Love you, Trippy. Matthew Solo Girl, set some time to play. Get out the guitar. Get out of the gutter. No, get out the guitar. That's what he meant. I'm kidding. See ya, Pops. Harry, I'm waiting for that address. April Truzy. Pops, peace. Love. Be kind to each other. Be creative. And don't forget to play. Pops out.